Hello, good morning. Just trying to go live in like 5 different places here. Okay, gonna give a couple minutes for people to join. And I really want to talk about um mm, I really want to talk about a calorie deficit. I want to talk about why a calorie deficit wouldn't be working because this is something that just this week I've talked to a few patients about. They've you know, we've come up for an appointment and they'll say, "I'm in a calorie deficit, I'm not losing weight, I'm super frustrated, like what do I do?" And so I just want to talk to, some of the nuance of weight loss, specifically as it pertains to women and women losing weight because our bodies function a bit differently. I also want to bust some of the myths that you probably have been told about weight loss in terms of, eating less makes you gain weight. And so we're going to talk about some of those pieces. Feel free to drop your questions as we're moving through because I know people tend to have a lot of questions on this topic. And I find that there's a lot of misinformation on this topic. A lot of people in the weight loss or fitness space, um, in my opinion, just make things up. And so I think it's really important that we're getting real information and we're talking about things that are real. So let's get into it. Let's just talk about kind of the first piece. So patients will say to me, Dr. Laura, I'm eating in a calorie deficit. I'm not losing weight. What is wrong with me? I've been eating 1,200 calories and I've been doing that consistently and I'm exercising. Why can I not lose weight? And so if that's you, I want you to let me know because that's literally what I'm talking about today. Um, so I want to talk about a few different pieces, a few different angles for this. So I'm going to start by talking about kind of the elephant in the room here as it pertains to weight loss. A calorie deficit will make you lose weight. Technically, that is true, right? If you're eating less energy than your body burns, you will lose weight. But for a lot of women, especially over 35 in perimenopause, dealing with hormonal shifts, the deficit that you actually need to make the scale move in some cases is so extreme, so restrictive that it's not safe and it's certainly not sustainable. I actually went through this with a patient yesterday. She said, I've been eating 1,500 calories a day. I'm not losing weight. And I say 1,500 because 1,500 is kind of like that sweet spot for me. I feel like it is a sustainable amount of a caloric deficit for a lot of people. It's the amount where they can eat and still not be starving. And so I went through it with a patient. We just went through their calculator. I use a calculator. I'll go through, I'll put my patient's age, their weight, their level of activity, and I'll tell them what their calorie amount has to be. And that is going to be for if they want to lose weight, but also if they want to be in maintenance, like whatever their goals are, we're looking at that. Okay. So I calculated this and I said, all right, how old are you? I'm just going to make up some numbers here. So she's in her 50s. Let's say 53. Okay. Let's say 185 pounds, 5'4". Okay. So got it, like not a massive amount of weight to lose, but a decent amount of weight to lose. Okay. I say, what's your level of activity? Sedentary. Doesn't really do much. Maybe a 15-minute walk every day, strolling around, walking the dog. So when I plug in all that information, the calorie deficit that we had, or the amount that we came to as far as a weight loss goal would be concerned, was like 1,100 calories, 1,000 calories. And that is where the problem lies. So this patient is telling me they're eating 1,500 calories, but what their body is burning puts them at 1,100 calories required for them to be in a deficit to lose weight. And so they would never lose weight if they continue to track at 1,500 and 1,200. And, 1,200 is so low that I'll never recommend that. But my point is sometimes your body, there's a lot of metabolic mess going on, and you cannot physically or safely be in a calorie deficit that makes sense to lose weight sustainably and to keep it off. Because what happens is, let's just say that person does, again, I would never recommend that, but let's say this person does go in a 1,000 or 800 calories per day deficit, an extreme calorie deficit, they'll probably lose weight. But how long are they going to keep that up? First of all. Second of all, what other mechanisms is that going to throw out of whack, right? So when we get to this, some people are actually already in a metabolic mess. Typically, this is years of chronic dieting. This is also going into perimenopause. This is also layered on with things like insulin resistance. And we get to a point where the metabolic mess is so deep that we just can't get out of this spiral. And so this deficit would be so extreme that it doesn't get us anywhere, right? This would further tank your metabolism. This would further wreck your muscle mass, because when you do lose weight, it's going to be all muscle, right? And then now we have increased body fat, which is more inflammatory, like et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then your energy is going to be so low, your hunger hormones are going to be so dysregulated that you eventually get kind of the opposite. And we end up in these like binge patterns, right? Your body's forcing you to eat. And so on one hand, yes, the calorie math is real, right? You have to be in a deficit to lose weight, period. However, that's not the whole story. We have to have these larger conversations, right? We've had calorie counting as a mainstream weight loss tool for decades, but women are more frustrated, more inflamed, and more metabolically unwell than ever. So the real question isn't, how do I just keep eating less? The real question is, why is my body holding on to weight? And what do I need to fix that so fat loss can happen naturally? And when I say naturally, I just want to be super clear, because some people take this conversation and then they think, oh, so I can just, take the fat loss release supplement and then I can just keep on keeping on. The reality is we still have to manage portion sizes. We still have to track in some capacity. For some people, it can be a little bit looser. For some people, it has to be a little bit tighter. We still have to track, but we can make tracking so it's not a nightmare. We can make tracking so it doesn't throw your body into this metabolic mayhem, okay? So before we even talk about root causes or get into anything else as far as weight loss goes, calorie tracking is a lot less accurate than we think, okay? I'm not saying this to shame anyone who tracks. I'm not saying this because, I'm trying to tell you that you're giving me the wrong information. I'm saying this because when we look at research, we see that there are innate inaccuracies in what we see. Now, if this isn't you, if you're like, no, we fixed that problem, I am tracking very accurately, then this isn't you. There's a lot of things to consider. But let's look at kind of what the research shows us. First, food labels have a margin of error. So in US and Canada, food labels are legally allowed to be off by about 20%. So like a 200 calorie snack bar could be 240. But if we do that all the time, and we layer on the fact that maybe you are a little bit metabolically mayhemmed, now that calorie deficit that you thought you were in, that you were not in, plus the margin of error that we see in a lot of spaces, kind of like ends up in a lot of problems for you. Second, restaurant and takeout food is consistently underestimated. Studies have shown that restaurant meals can contain 200 to 500 more calories than what's listed or what you estimate. And so we're just not good at eyeballing portions. Third, home cooking is hard to track accurately. You're estimating portion sizes, potentially using imprecise measuring tools. Fourth, your calorie burn is also an estimate. Your fitness tracker, your Apple Watch, studies show those can overestimate calorie burn, especially from exercise, by 20 to 93%. Huge range. Your watch also doesn't know your muscle mass, your hormonal status, where you are in perimenopause. It's giving you a best guess. And fifth, how many calories you actually absorb from food actually varies by person. So your gut microbiome can play a massive role in this. Two women can eat the exact same meal and absorb a different amount of calories based on entirely on their gut bacteria. So when you're eating 1,400 calories and burning 350 calories at the gym, those numbers might both be very significantly off. You might be eating more than you think and burning less than you think, right? So I'm not saying that we can't do anything about this. We absolutely can correct for this. I just want you to understand that there is so much nuance when it comes to understanding what the body needs to succeed. So I want you to understand, if you've been in a calorie deficit and it doesn't work for you, one of these metrics is off, and we need to really evaluate that. Okay? Now, Let's talk about the perimenopausal body and what's actually happening for women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s. Because perimenopause, on top of all of the things that I've already mentioned, perimenopause tends to change this game entirely, right? So when estrogen starts to decline or change, we lose muscle mass. This is called sarcopenia, starts earlier than most people realize. And muscle is metabolically expensive. It burns energy just to exist. So this is why doing a drastic calorie deficit might work. Like you might lose weight, but this is also one of the reasons why we gain it right back, because we're losing the majority of what we're losing is muscle. So we need muscle. The less muscle your body has, the fewer calories you're going to burn at rest. So your basal metabolic rate can drop. If we layer that on to all of those hormonal changes, now we have we get ourselves into this situation where your basal metabolic rate is so low. I come back to the first example I gave, that you would quite literally have to eat 900 or 1,000 calories a day to lose weight. And that is not realistic, safe, or sustainable. Now we add your mitochondria. So, mitochondria, think about the energy factor inside of the cells. As we age, our mitochondria become less efficient, right? So, as we age, we have a number of things that happen. I've talked in other videos about metabolic changes. I've talked about inflammation. I've talked about insulin resistance, but the mitochondria get damaged in this process. So, as you age, your mitochondria are going to be more damaged. There's going to be less of them. And so you're actually going to burn fewer calories. Your body's actually generating less of that energy that would drive you to move, to exercise, to feel good. So when you're aging and you feel this general fatigue, sometimes that can be because the mitochondria are not producing the energy that they used to produce, right? So you think, oh, I wish I had the energy like when I was 20 or before I had kids or whatever that looks like. But at the end of the day, it has a lot to do with how well your mitochondria are functioning. So now we have a smaller tank with a less powerful engine. Then we have visceral fat. So as estrogen drops, your fat storage patterns actually change. Your body actually starts preferring to store fat in the abdomen. Even my patients who don't have a weight loss goal will often say to me, I just have all my fat that's accumulating in my belly. It's just belly fat. And they don't necessarily have a BMI that's, overweight. Maybe they've always exercised, but it's a composition issue, right? And here's the problem. Visceral fat is not passive, it's more metabolically active. It produces inflammatory signals that drive insulin resistance. So we're going to talk about insulin resistance, and I'm going to do other videos going into insulin resistance in depth because it's a big part of how I help patients lose weight. But it creates this feedback loop that makes fat loss even harder. And then there's the hormonal chaos. Two hormones control your hunger and fullness. Ghrelin, think about grr, your stomach's grumbling, tells you when you're hungry. And leptin tells you that you're full and satisfied. In a healthy, well-rested, hormonally balanced body, these two work together beautifully. But in perimenopause, we have disrupted sleep, we have elevated cortisol, we have hormonal fluctuations, your estrogen's quite literally on a roller coaster. And so this system goes haywire. Your leptin signaling breaks down, so your brain stops receiving the I'm full message to know that they're full. So you might end up overeating. Your ghrelin also stays elevated, so you're going to feel hungrier. You feel hungry all the time. You have cravings. Your cravings are for sugar. And I'd love you to tell me in the comments if you have cravings for sugar because of this, or if this makes sense metabolically with what you're experiencing. And this is because your brain is genuinely not wired properly to help you meet that caloric demand and deficit. And also, if we layer on the fact that someone is insulin resistant, we know, like I always say to patients, the goal ultimately would be to have you eating in a way that is quote unquote intuitive. So eating when you're hungry, eating until you're full, and then not eating again until you're hungry again, right? But the reality is when we have insulin resistance, when we have inflammation and hormonal fluctuations, the way I lay it out for my patients is you actually can't trust your body's innate signals. We can't trust our hunger hormones to tell us what to do. So what we have to do is we have to make intentional decisions to drive the bus on our own, to create a scenario where we're actually just telling our body. I find in my insulin resistant patients, the biggest pattern I see is they eat when they're, in the morning. Let's say they should be eating in the morning. They're not hungry. They have no appetite. Then they undereat breakfast, undereat lunch. Dinner comes, they probably eat a normal dinner. Everyone eats a normal dinner. Everyone eats a dinner that's like chicken, broccoli, rice. It's the rest of the meals that really go haywire, unless you're like eating dinner out. But I find the majority of people, if they're being mindful of, eating at all, they tend to eat a diet that is like breakfast, crap, lunch, not there, dinner, really good. And then after dinner, they're wondering why their cravings are, driving them to eat everything in the kitchen when the day's done, because your hormones are not allowing your hunger signals to be balanced. So we end up not hungry when we should be and hungry when we shouldn't be, right? So a lot of times we have to get out of that loop of insulin resistance so we can recalibrate our appetite so that we can then be in a calorie deficit. So I'm not saying that just fixing your hormones is going to fix or help you lose weight without a calorie deficit, but it might really help, right? Once we can get you out of that fog and you can trust your body for proper hormone signaling and appetite signaling, then it's a lot easier to stay in the portions that your body was meant to have, right? So this is kind of the way we get out of that loop. And then if we look at sleep, sleep makes this way worse. This is incredibly common, especially in perimenopause, because progesterone's dropping, cortisol's elevated. This directly worsens your hunger and your satiety hormones. And we know that one night of poor sleep measurably increases hunger and cravings the next day. So you're like, oh, my friend is like doing this deficit and this diet, and they're losing weight, and they're, I can't do it. I'm starving. I'm miserable. I have cravings. Like, why can't I follow it, but they can? First of all, you don't want to relate your situation to someone else's situation because you have no idea what's going on in the back end. In my personal weight loss journey, I did a lot of that work before I stepped into a calorie deficit. And sometimes we can do some of that work ahead of time, but sometimes it's the best move forward is to say, how do we fix the metabolic mess? Losing weight or not, for me, I didn't lose any weight. I just fixed the metabolic mess, worked on my sleep, worked on my stress. And then I was like, okay, now that I feel like I can make my way through this, I'm then going to step into a calorie deficit. Now, there is that argument. There is a discussion where just being in a calorie deficit, so losing weight, can actually help with that metabolic mess as well. So we have to figure out that balance between, making things better and driving things into a worse situation ultimately, right? So we have to, again, this is an individualized decision we have to make as to how we're going to move forward in a strategy for you. But I just want you to know that if you've tried a calorie deficit and it didn't work for you, something needs to shift, right? So let's talk about so again, let's go back to sleep. So chronic insomnia is going to worsen your weight loss plan because of its impact on cravings and inflammation and cortisol. And so being mindful of that is really important. And then we look at the thermic effect of food. Your body actually burns calories digesting food. It's called the thermic effect of food. As we lose muscle and our metabolism slows, we actually burn fewer calories through digestion. Your body actually becomes more efficient, meaning it extracts more from less, which sounds great, except it means your body needs fewer calories to maintain itself. So you're like, I never had to do anything about my weight. And then it just kept creeping. Like I just ate whatever. I went based on my cues. Me too. And then you get to a point where that stops working. So you've got less muscle, less efficient mitochondria, visceral fat driving inflammation, broken hunger signals, disrupted sleep, making everything worse, and a body that's getting more efficient at squeezing energy out of everything you eat. So it makes sense that a simple calorie deficit isn't cutting it, right? So let's talk about some of the specific root causes that drive this weight loss resistant. And this is where I work with my patients on managing these and actually getting to an individualized plan that's beyond a calorie deficit, but still looks at all of the pieces. So here's the analogy that I like to use. I changed the analogy, but the result is still the same. Your glucose levels, again, what shows up on standard blood work is like in a display window, okay? Your sugar. It looks calm and normal from the outside in a store, but nobody's checking the stock room, right? In the stock room, this is where insulin is working potentially overtime, trying to pound the doors of your cells saying, let the sugar in. When insulin is chronically elevated, even if your blood sugar looks normal, your body physically cannot access fat stores. So you're going to be less likely to have fat burning, but you're also going to be more likely to have these cravings and these spirals of kind of everything else that drives the bus, right? So this is where we have a difficult time because of where we store our fat, because of insulin resistance, how that creates inflammation, how that messes with our hunger signals, and everything else, right? And the thing is, insulin resistance starts to develop decades before it becomes a problem from a diabetes perspective. I'm running blood sugar testing on pretty much all of my patients, and everyone has the same question like, do I have diabetes? Do I have to worry about diabetes? And most of the time, some of the time I'm like, yes, we do. But most of the time it's like, well, not right now, but if we do nothing or we keep letting things move in the same trajectory, we're going to have to worry about that, right? The next root cause is cortisol and chronic stress because your nervous system has one job, and that is to keep you alive. So when your nervous system perceives a threat, whether it's a stressful job, a difficult relationship, poor sleep, chronic restriction of calories, or over exercising, it really activates your survival response. Your cortisol goes up. And it's cortisol's job to raise blood sugar, to give you that quick energy to deal with that alleged threat that we're thinking, right? This raises insulin. And so I often see like sometimes patients will be like, I eat a really great diet. My diet is locked down. I don't know why I'm insulin resistant. But sometimes it's literally the result of chronic, undermanaged stress combined with poor sleep, not addressing the nervous system, not creating boundaries that puts your body into a spiral where quite literally you are releasing sugar into the bloodstream when you don't need to be. And it's not until we manage that stress response that we actually see traction in the blood sugar change. And when we see traction in the blood sugar change, we see traction in our ability to manage our cravings, manage our appetite, manage our portions, leading to weight loss in a calorie deficit. See where I'm going? Right? Sometimes we just have to take a moment and pause and actually address that stress that is driving the sugar up. And we see this when we do a test. I call the insulin glucose challenge. I don't call it, it's called that. But it's the insulin glucose challenge, and it looks at your sugar and your insulin over 4 points. It looks at fasted, half hour, 1 hour, 2 hour. Everyone hates doing it. Everyone complains about doing it. Everyone tells me they show me their black and blue arms. Trust me, I've done it. I've done it as well. Practice what I preach. It's horrible. But the reason why I keep getting people to do it is not because I love people hating doing this test and pushing back on it and saying I almost puked last time. It's because it gives me data, it gives me information that allows me to make decisions for your care. It allows me to make, here's what we need to do next. Here's what's working. Here's what we can stop taking, right? Like I think that's the best conversation when we can look at our treatment plan and say, okay, we can actually stop taking this because we're actually seeing results from it, right? It's a bigger thing to be able to say like, let's change your plan because you're like doing really well, right? So we need to look at your nervous system, right? Again, you'll see this on the internet, you'll see this on TikTok, Instagram, wherever you are, that cortisol causes belly fat. And I think that's such a small portion of the conversation. It's not more about, cortisol causing belly fat. It's what that belly fat does, how that creates inflammation, how that drives further nervous system dysfunction, and how we get out of that is not taking your cortisol supplement. It's managing your nervous system. It's looking at boundaries. It's saying no. It's sleeping regularly. It's getting off the phone, except when I'm doing a live video. You can be on your phone. But it's really, really looking at what can you start to say no to. And I think a lot of this, like when we talk about exercise and we talk about, women, especially moms, especially people who have gone into perimenopause, and we think about, weight loss. Okay. If we just think about weight loss, I still listen, but you have an echo. Oh no. Do I have an echo? If you're listening live, do I have an echo? Primary microphone. Hopefully you guys can hear me. I didn't know I had an echo. What if I put my microphone closer? Is this echoing? Yes. Oh, shoot. Well, that's annoying. No, so Instagram sounds okay. TikTok says I have an echo. There's nothing more I can do because I am not really well versed at tech support. Um, so I do have music playing in the background, and I'm wondering if maybe I turn that down, it'll make the sound better overall. But now I've lost my train of thought. Nervous system. Yes. When we think about prioritizing ourselves and we think about um, deciding to, like, let's say the goal is weight loss, right? I think a lot of it comes down to deciding that you're worth it and deciding that you're important enough to focus on. And I don't mean that in a way that says, we have to be over exercising and we have to be go, 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 and everybody has to track every morsel. And if you don't, blah, blah, blah. Like, we have to have a balanced and important relationship with food. Food is fuel, but we can also enjoy food. Food is part of, understanding relationships with people and going out for dinners and going to things. Like, we have to be able to participate in life. But I think the conversation, when I really reflect on it personally, from what I've experienced in my own journey, I think that one thing I constantly come back to and I find myself coming back to is the fact that I didn't value myself enough to put myself in that number one spot, knowing that putting myself in that number one spot would actually be beneficial for everyone around me, right? Putting myself in that number one spot and actually focusing on my own health wasn't making me a bad mom, wasn't making me a mom that took time away for her kids because I said, sorry, mommy's on the spin bike. But it was actually a mom that really showed my kids that exercise is important, that valuing yourself is important, that I was showing up after a really good sweat and I was feeling really energized. It was a mom that was able to, chase my kids when they want me to chase them at the park instead of being out of breath. It was a mom that wanted to go on bike rides because I wasn't embarrassed to go on a bike because I actually felt okay about my abilities to bike, right? And so I think that it's taken me from a perspective of I don't have time because I'm a mom. I have two little kids, 4 and 6. I obviously run a business. I see patients. I have to do all the things outside of that. And I think that the biggest thing is really just deciding if you're a priority, right? Because we all find time. We all find time to scroll on TikTok. We all find time to be on Instagram. We all find time to watch that movie or binge that show. But I think it's about what's important to you, right? We find time to make that hair appointment, which I love it, right? A lot of these pieces are self care. I'm not saying we don't do any of these things. I love a good show. I love a good TikTok scroll. I'm just saying if these things are out competing things that are really important, then I think we just need to reevaluate where our priorities lie, right? Everyone on TikTok is saying I'm echoey. Everyone on Instagram is saying I'm not. And I don't know how to fix that problem. Is that better, TikTok? I'm trying to maybe, but I'm using a StreamYard, which goes to everything. And I've gone on TikTok live before at the same time. And I'm not on my phone. So I don't know what the problem is. If there's an audio quality issue. I'm so sorry for everyone on TikTok. If you want to go over to my Instagram, apparently it sounds better. I'm also live on YouTube, same name at Dr. Laura ND. So if you want to also watch, this will be posted. Oh, someone moved over from TikTok. Apparently it's better on my Instagram. So if you want to go there, also, like I said, my YouTube is the same name. So I'm so sorry, TikTok. I'm trying. I'm trying to be live on both spaces because StreamYard doesn't allow me to do this. So, anyways, coming back to that conversation, I just think that again, a lot of the things we've talked about are important, and I think they're really critical, in fact. But I think if we look at the crux of it and we look at the root cause of it all, I think it really often comes down to the fact that we have to decide if we're worth it, especially as a mom and as a business owner. I had to decide that, I was worth it and worth, focusing on and really putting in that work. So, those are all the pieces. We know there's a root cause behind it, but I think also everybody's looking for the secret sexy, key. They're looking for how do I do this like one small thing and just drop weight, right? In the menopause world, I see people coming to me and they say, because I also work with a gynecologist, and they say, put me on testosterone because my girlfriend's on it and she's just dropped weight. And the reality is you're not your girlfriend. You're just not. And the second thing is not many people talk about the fact that testosterone can make you gain hair where you don't want it and lose hair where you don't want to lose it, right? It's not all good. It's not always all good things. We have to make sure we're looking at it from like a big picture perspective. And so again, coming back to that cortisol piece, that boundary piece, that priority piece, I think it's the one that's mostly overlooked, but I think it's the most important thing that we can do is start to create boundaries for ourselves. And we can also ease into it. Like when I work with my patients, I do ease into it and I decide, where are you at? What is your life look like? And how can we implement this? Some people, I see them first visit and I'm like, we can do a calorie deficit. Let's go. And I give them their numbers, I give them their goals, and we move forward. I think the biggest thing when it comes to the calorie deficit and the weight loss conversation is, have we looked at all the other root causes so we can rule out that we're actually doing the right thing, that we're focusing on the right thing first. The second thing, and the thing I'm going to stress the most, if you are on a weight loss journey and that all the stars are aligned and you're moving forward in a deficit, keep going. Put your head down, look at the floor and look forward. Don't look at the side, don't look behind, don't get discouraged. Okay? One of the things that you can do, and I love doing, is building a scale story, getting on the scale more than once a month. Everyone's so scared of the number on the scale, but this like exposure therapy, just looking at it as a number, taking it as data. And I know in my own experience, younger, growing up with, all the diets being diets, and growing up working in the restaurant industry, the serving industry, I worked for a lot of companies that your looks and your size mattered, and that messes with your mind. But, I found that when I was not tracking and not being very intentional about the goals, I had a worse relationship with food because I was just going based on what I thought should happen next. And I'll give you an example about that. I find when women don't track, this is what their day looks like. Their morning's like, I had 2 boiled eggs and a black coffee. And I say it in this voice because it's really funny when we actually think about it. Because you're like, that's me. Lunch, they eat nothing. They eat air for lunch. And sometimes if they're lucky because they're working from home, maybe they grab, a couple crackers and an apple. Dinner, they made it for their family and they prioritize their family. So they made a wonderful chicken and, rice and broccoli and everything else. And then, they ate that dinner and then they're like, Laura, I ate the entire cupboard for the rest of the evening because I was so hungry. I had so many cravings. I went to bed hungry. I woke up at 3 a.m. hungry, and they wonder why, right? They wonder why that all of that happened. And the reality is they're under fueling because they let their brain tell them that they should be avoiding potatoes and not eating pasta and not eating rice because those things are high calorie and high calorie is bad, right? Like that's what we tell ourselves versus when we're more mindful about the choices we're making and we say, I tell my patients after being through my own weight loss journey and my own tracking and I track what I eat more pasta. I don't limit myself. I'm not the person eating the burger with no bun anymore because I very intentionally choose the foods that I'm eating and I add them in. We eat the bread, we eat the pasta, we eat the rice. We look at our portion sizes, we fix the metabolic mess, and we put you on a plan that encompasses all of that. So this is why weight loss is not simple. This is why, the patients I talk to have been on a million diets. They've done Jenny Craig, they've done Bernstein, they've like you name it, they've been on it. Keto, carnivore, whatever. All of them have one thing in common, they gain it back. And the reality is we haven't fixed the metabolic mess that got us there. And we haven't actually, learned the strategies that keep us in sustainability land. Something like Jenny Craig, back in the day, you would just buy all your meals. Well, that's not teaching you anything. That's teaching you that you buy the meals from somewhere and then you have to come back and buy the meals again. And as soon as you stop buying the meals, you don't know what to do. Splenda and Premier Protein Shake as cream. Great, right? Like great way to add protein to your coffee. One thing I tell my patients though is like, if adding protein to your coffee is something that you enjoy, it allows you to hit your protein goals and it allows you to, meet whatever demand you're looking to meet, then that's fantastic. One thing I realized really early on is I don't like ruining my coffee with protein powder. That's a personal thought. I don't like ruining my coffee with protein powder. So what do? I just make sure that I add protein in different ways. I make sure that my morning looks, different. If I'm having a coffee and I need protein, like it has to look different than someone who can get 30 grams of protein in their coffee and then they can eat whatever they want, right? Like have what you want and add what you need as far as it comes to diet. But this is why it has to be individual. This is why following the person online who does X, Y, and Z doesn't get anybody results long term. I decided early on, I don't really like smoothies. I'll drink a shake. And by the way, if you've been to Costco lately, the BioSteel, they're called Clean Healthy Protein. And I'm not saying this because I'm sponsored by them. If they want to sponsor me, that's great. They're delicious. They're literally delicious. They come in vanilla and chocolate. I was going to go back and grab the vanilla because I wanted to try it, but it's so good. 30 grams of protein. They're lactose free. So if you're doing dairy but can't do lactose, they're great. A lot of my patients do the Premier Protein. I'll put an asterisk behind that because, if you're insulin resistant, I have thoughts about dairy. But again, those are advanced tactics. Those are advanced strategies. Step 1 is we have to understand what the metabolic mess is. Step 2, we figure it out. We make it work for you, right? BioSteel is, BioSteel, the clean healthy protein shakes are actually a shake. They come in it's a liquid and you just drink it. So that's a really, really easy grab and go option. We went to the zoo and I just packed some of those because it was just an easy way to drink 30 grams of protein. And I always find when it comes to shakes and smoothies, a lot of times you're like choking it back because you just don't feel like having a thick beverage. The BioSteel ones are not thick. So I love that. I just went on a massive tangent there because I still have a couple root causes that I want to get through. But I'm glad we went on that tangent because I really wanted to touch on those pieces. Next root cause is gut health. I think people underestimate this. Again, when I'm talking about root causes, I just want to reiterate, I'm not saying that we do like a microbiome protocol with you. We fix your gut and all of a sudden 20 pounds is going to fall off. It could if you're holding on to water weight or weight from inflammation, like that could definitely happen. But it may be that it helps treat the metabolic mess so we can more easily follow our portion control we know we have to follow, right? What the point I want to keep coming back to, and really not stop coming back to is that you do have to be eating for what your body needs. You cannot be eating in excess, fix your cortisol, and, lose weight. Okay. On that same note, you can fix your metabolic health and also not lose weight. You don't have to be insulin resistant to be overweight. We do know that there are risks just from being overweight. We do know that there's health risks just from being overweight, just in general. But we also know that not everybody who's overweight is insulin resistant. And so we can fix the metabolic mess and then put you in a deficit. And that can be a lot easier to achieve, right? So coming back to your gut does more than just digest food. Your microbiome, the trillions of bacteria that live in your gut, regulate your metabolism, recycle your estrogen, and help influence how many calories you absorb from food. And that can even affect your hunger signals as well. So think about your gut like a garden. If it's overrun with weeds, so dysbiosis, bacterial imbalances, inflammation, it actually doesn't matter how many seeds you plant. So I always joke with patients. I'm like, I am not a gardener, but I think if I was going to plant tomatoes, if I was going to go try to grow tomatoes, I probably wouldn't go to this like weird, soil that doesn't have any sort of color to it and just dump tomato seeds and leave. Like I probably just wouldn't do that, right? And so we can think about our gut in the same way. We're not just going to dump in probiotics, without understanding how those are going to work in the system. Again, gut imbalances don't always look like digestive symptoms. Sometimes they actually show up as fatigue, low energy, brain fog, mood changes, weight that won't budge, bloating after meals, skin issues like chronic eczema, thyroid issues, specifically like autoimmune stuff. A lot of people will be like, but I poop every day. But maybe your microbiome imbalances are showing up as your autoimmune disease or as your skin or, right? And so when I talk about my, the way I work with patients through my programs, my Her Thriving program, my weight loss program, which by the way is almost full. So if you want to join, it's a patient treatment program. You have to be in Ontario. But if you're interested in joining, send me a DM on Instagram. Or you can go, it's not on my website. Send me a message on Instagram. But when I'm working through any sort of results with patients, I'm working through 4 pillars, right? Hormones. We have to understand the hormonal landscape and what's getting in the way of hormones working. Pillar 1. Pillar 2 is always gut and microbiome. Because of what I just said, your gut influences the way your hormones are processed, the way they're activated, etc. And so it's actually really important that we're looking at that pillar. Pillar 3 is metabolic health, your insulin, your inflammation. Again, I talked about all of those reasons why, right? And pillar 4 is nervous system, stress, sleep, circadian rhythm, right? Because of all the things I talked about when I talked about cortisol. And so this is why we're looking at doing these things in a priority. I always say to patients, it's not what you do, it's actually the order with which you do it that matters so much more. And then we have root cause 4, which is thyroid and nutrient deficiencies. This is one thing I see constantly. Women come into my office, they're exhausted, hair's thinning, can't lose weight. Doctor runs blood work, it's normal. So then she goes into this calorie deficit that is probably way too low, but not low enough to lose weight given her metabolic state, and she sees no results. And then she's frustrated, and then she says, chuck it in the F it bucket, and she stops doing it. But when we dig deeper, there's low iron, low ferritin, low vitamin D, low B12. And then when we look at the thyroid beyond basic TSH, we actually see that there's a dysfunction there. So what's happening in this person is the thyroid is not being fed. It doesn't have any nutrients. It can't function. And your thyroid is your metabolic master. So it's really important that we stop treating women's health like iron deficiency is normal. Even from a weight loss perspective, you're like, you talked about calories, you talked about weight loss, right? But all of these things are important. Looking at iron is important. We need to look at all of these pieces. And this is why people struggle. If your thyroid is not using the nutrients it needs or getting the nutrients it needs, we're not going to be effectively supporting our mitochondria, coming back to creating energy and coming back to that weight loss conversation. Vitamin D is a perfect example because vitamin D acts more like a hormone than a vitamin. It's involved in insulin sensitivity, immune regulation, metabolism, and deficiency is really common. Especially here, we're in Ontario, Canada. We pretty much never see the sun. It's really great. But one of the things that I find so incredibly frustrating is that patients will get their vitamin D. Well, they probably won't get their vitamin D tested. Then they might tell their doctor, like, please test my vitamin D, please. Their doctor tests their vitamin D and they're like, you're fine, take 1,000. In my experience, doing 1,000 international units a day in most people does not actually change. It actually, typically they end up in a lower state of deficiency because it's not many people's maintenance dose. When we look at research, vitamin D is fat soluble. We know that the larger you are as a human, the higher you need vitamin D doses. The people who have autoimmune disease, for example, are going to use more vitamin D. When we think about these nutrients, we often don't consider the fact that we use them. So we have to keep replenishing them. And if we're not getting with vitamin D, you're absolutely not getting enough dietary sources of vitamin D to replenish them quick enough for the amount that you're losing them, which is an important thing to understand as well. So those deficiencies are a big deal. And then talking about exercise. So the way I think we framed exercise for women in the context of weight loss, I think has done a lot of damage. Quite frankly, I'm actually quite tired of seeing online that, especially on TikTok, it's like you see Pilates is the only way I saw results. And, another girl's like, sorry, stop doing HIIT because HIIT's throwing your cortisol off, and only lift weights and all the other pieces. It drives me nuts because what we need to do is literally exercise, right? We've been taught to think of exercise as a calorie burning tool. Burn more than you eat, run more, lose more. So women do hours of cardio, they burn themselves out, they eat less to compensate, and then they feel terrible. Exercise is not primarily a weight loss tool. It is a metabolic health tool. And that distinction, in my opinion, changes everything. One, it builds muscle and preserves muscle mass. So I've talked about why muscle mass is everything. Strength training is one of the most important tools and powerful tools that you have for improving your metabolism long term. Not because of the just burn of calories when you're exercising. It doesn't. Compared to cardio, it burns less calories. But muscle tissue burns more energy at rest. And we have to bring up your muscle mass. Number 2, we know exercise dramatically improves insulin sensitivity. When you do resistance training or cardio, but when you do resistance training, your muscles literally pull sugar out of the blood without needing insulin. This is actually one of the most effective interventions we have for insulin resistance, and it works quickly. A single strength training session improves insulin sensitivity for up to 24 to 48 hours. Number 3, we know that exercise regulates appetite and hunger hormones. And the way that I used exercise in my weight loss had a lot to do with that. The right kind of exercise, moderate intensity, not chronic excessive cardio, actually helps normalize your hunger hormones. It makes your hunger signals more accurate. And we know that intense chronic cardio, on the other hand, can actually dysregulate appetite and increase cravings. So I'm not saying don't run. If you love to run, freaking run. But I also think that we have to change the types of activity that we're doing. Stop, only doing Pilates. We don't have to always only do one thing so excessively. I'm a big fan and a big believer of creating a system that works for you. Map it out. What do you love to do? Oh, I love running. I love biking. I love spin. Like, what sort of cardio do you love? You're like, I don't really love cardio. Go for a brisk walk. But then you also have to do strength training. Is that body weight? Sure, if you're just starting out. But you don't have to join a CrossFit gym. You don't have to join a gym at all. You can actually get the same exact workout at home. It's a matter of where are you starting? What are your goals? But we don't just have to say, I've just started Pilates. Now I do Pilates every day. We need different types of exercise. That core exercise, that strength training, really important. Where's your cardio, right? We have to be able to balance those things. We also know when it comes to the cortisol conversation, exercise lowers cortisol. Now everyone's going to be like, but HIIT increases cortisol. Yeah, exercise increases cortisol temporarily. That's actually a normal adaptive response. I really love patients to look at their own body. How is your own body responding? Are you doing, you're training for a marathon and now your sleep's crap, your HRV is tanked? Like what's going on, right? If you're doing really well, you're like running every day, training for a marathon, you're fueling appropriately, your HRV's good, your sleep's good, keep on freaking keeping on. Not everybody has to stop doing HIIT. I've had patients who are devastated. They're like, I love a good HIIT workout. It like gives me a high like no other, or I love running, but this random person on TikTok told me it was causing my cortisol and belly fat. And I'm like, okay, first of all, keep doing it if you love it and if you're tolerating it well and everything else. But I also have patients take a look at, are they overdoing it? Right? What's your sleep score look like? I have a watch so I can look at my recovery hours. And I always look to see, I'm looking at it now. So I did an exercise this morning. My recovery says 5 more hours, which is perfectly in line with my training because I exercise in the morning. We also don't have to be doing rest days. If your exercise is moderate and you're tolerating it, we can do intentional movement days. We can have one day that we just do yoga and like a really long walk. We can have days where we do like I'll do a recovery ride on my spin bike, or we have days where we're doing lighter weights, or maybe we have 2 Pilates days, right? Some people love soccer, some people love ice skating, some people love competitive sports, some people like individual sports. You have to do what you love. But overall, exercise improves sleep quality. It supports dopamine and serotonin. All of those things feed back into better metabolic health, better food choices, less emotional eating. When I started exercising consistently, I had less cravings, right? So it's not because I want to do an exercise to burn X amount of calories, which at the beginning of this conversation, I already said could be inaccurate, so that I can go eat that amount of calories. It's that I want to regulate my mood and my hunger signals. The other thing, and I think most important, especially in midlife when a calorie deficit has never worked for you, is that exercise improves mitochondrial function. Those energy factories we talked about, exercise is one of the best signals that we can give our cells to build more mitochondria, make them more efficient. That's how we turn the metabolism back on. And for somebody whose calorie deficit has not worked, and they just can't eat little enough to lose weight, instead of just making them eat less and less, it's like, let's build muscle. Let's get consistent exercise. Let's fuel the body at maintenance for once, and then let's go from there. And walking is genuinely underrated, but in my opinion, it just can't be the only physical activity. Taking our dogs for a 20-minute walk is just not enough. We're sedentary in general. That's one thing I noticed about myself going through my own journey is I'm very sedentary. I sit in front of a computer like a lot of people with patients. I know anyone on TikTok screaming echo in caps lock. Come join me on Instagram. There's no echo there. So anyways, but anyways, essentially going for a walk is fine. But I think in general, it's about the movement we do all of the time. So, okay, I'm gonna close out my TikTok because it's not great. If you want to come join me on Instagram, it's Dr. Laura ND. It's the same username. Fix Echo, Dr. Phil, come join us on Instagram. Okay. Anyways, moving forward. Okay. So that is that as far as the exercise conversation goes. But I really want you guys to think about all of the gaps that you could be filling in terms of next steps for you. So let's bring it all together. If you're in a calorie deficit and you're not losing weight, you can be dealing with a few of the things we talked about. Tracking might be less accurate. That's actually the easiest one to fix, right? Um, you know, we could have a metabolism that is slow due to muscle loss, mitochondrial changes, and hormonal shifts. Insulin resistance can influence all the things I talked about. Elevated cortisol can keep your body in storage mode. Your gut that's inflamed and dysregulated can cause you to absorb things differently. Nutrient deficiencies slow everything down. Hunger hormones can be completely out of sync, and poor sleep can make everything worse. A calorie deficit doesn't fix any of those things. It can make you hungrier and more exhausted. What actually works is addressing the root causes. So, looking at all of those pieces and mapping out a plan that gets you out of it. And so, a calorie deficit can work. Your body just has to be ready to be in that deficit. And so, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about today. If you want to rewatch this, this will be available on my Instagram or YouTube or my Facebook. If you have questions, comment below. Otherwise, like I said, I have a weight loss program that is starting in June. I do have a couple spots left if you want to join it. It is a patient treatment program. And if you want to start to implement some of these strategies, this might be a good spot for you. So have a great day, guys, and we'll talk soon. Bye.